So first, a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, so it'll be sent out to everybody. So if there's a piece that you missed, or if you want to re-listen to any of it, you're welcome to it. Just watch your email for that. Please mute yourself in between questions. We definitely want to make this interactive, so you're welcome to ask questions, but in between, if you mute yourself, that way we don't hear you driving down the road or kids or dogs, that kind of good stuff. That would be great. And then audio. So I think it defaults to allow you to listen in with your computer speakers. It seems to be a little bit better quality and less cutting out if you call in. So under the audio tab of the GoToWebinar screen, you can change it from computer audio to phone call, and it gives you some call-in instructions. I highly recommend that. So then, like I said, it is going to be interactive, so if you have questions, you can raise your hand, which is that little hand icon, and it'll let us know that you'd like to speak, and then you can just kind of audibly ask your question to Ramsey or Todd, or you can always use the chat box and type your questions in, and we'll get to them that way as well. So what is the Washington Center for Women in Business? Why are we here doing these webinars? We are an SBA Women's Business Center, which helps women who either want to start their business, or if they're already in business, how can they grow, how can they be more profitable?
This is your dad. You have to come out here. It's cool.
Sorry about that. How can they grow? How can they be more successful, more profitable? How do they use their time and resources better? We help in pretty much anything related to government, or I'm sorry, to businesses. So is it your startup planning, growth planning, marketing, social media, finance, anything related to that? We do workshops, either online like this one or in person. You can see our entire calendar at wcwb.org. Or you can also schedule a one-on-one coaching session with our business coach, Christine Buckley, and she can help you achieve whatever your business goal is. Help us, or let us help you get there. So a little bit more, there's our contact information. Please feel free to reach out anytime. When you sit down with us, it is $25 a session. However, the first session is free. And if for some reason, maybe you're out of a job, maybe you can't afford the $25 a session, there are scholarships available. Just please feel free to give me a call or an email, and we can chat about that. And I know most of you are located kind of locally, Thurston County area, but we cover the state of Washington. So if you have friends or relatives, anything that might need this kind of help, feel free to send them our way. So with that, I will get it over to Todd and Ramsey here. They're going to talk about who they are and what Brightwire is. And then we have some questions that we've gathered before this started, kind of how they can address your concerns. But if you have questions about either what we're talking about currently, feel free to type it in, or if you have a question that they were not getting to, again, please stop us and ask that question. We want to make sure we get you the information that you need. So with that, I will stop and I'll lead it over to you guys.
Well, this is Todd with Brightwire, and Ramsey is with me as well. Thank you very much for this opportunity. We really enjoy working with local small businesses and helping out on the IT planning side and support. We've been in business now for a little over 12 years and primarily serve Olympia and the Tacoma area. And really not outside of that area because we spend a lot of time working directly with clients and helping them through their day. So we had some questions.
Yeah.
If you were going to introduce the questions.
Yeah, so like I said, we'll go ahead and get started, but if you have any questions, audience people, please feel free to interject. So when somebody is starting a business, what are some of the key information technology concerns and opportunities that they ought to have in mind?
I think the most important thing is to understand the role of IT in the business itself. So, from our perspective, it's a business question, and the planning should be around how can technology help in the day-to-day operations, the communication, taking advantage of some of those interactive technologies that are available. challenge is finding the right set of tools at the right stage of the business, and then making these transitions as you grow. Your original platform you worked with, whatever that may be, you'll start to identify areas where it's inefficient and kind of creates these operational choke points. So at the end of the day, you really want to understand how your business functions, how it operates, how you generate revenue, and understanding how various technologies can help streamline that process. But again, it's really a business question, not so much an IT question. That being said, there are a lot of technologies that work well together, and sometimes they don't work well together, so it's important to work with somebody that has that industry expertise and knowledge to sort of help navigate the better choices. And it is a pretty complex component of your business. Just like, finance and legal and HR, IT is kind of its own major component of the business itself, and there's a lot of information to keep track of.
So, yeah, building on that, I think when you're just first starting a business, it's like every other aspect of your business, which is that you have to get started the best that you can and sort of find what's at hand and available, and sort of pull things together, and also have sort of an idea of kind of where you're going in the next step. So it's important to sort of look ahead, but sort of grab hold of and use what is at hand.
Great. So when business owners are kind of starting their early path, a lot of them have limited financial resources. What types of IT infrastructure and practices should be at the top of their list of priorities?
Well, this kind of builds off of the original question, and really at this point in time, there's a lot of opportunity to go with solutions that are not major upfront costs. More traditionally, you would have to come up with, a loan to purchase, maybe $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 worth of IT equipment and get it all configured and get it working properly. With the advent of the cloud, which is really just a buzzword for subscription-based services, a lot of small businesses now have the opportunity to invest kind of incrementally as they grow. So if they're 5 people now, maybe even 2 people now, but they know they're going to, their plans are to grow to 5 or maybe 10 people, given the right set of tools that are available online, Salesforce, Office 365, those purchases can be made essentially on a monthly basis, and it's tied directly to what their staff count is, as opposed to buying, 10 copies of Office for $400, that's $4,000, or maybe purchasing some sort of software application or that may be thousands of dollars to get going. There's a lot of opportunity these days to kind of buy just the amount that you need. And the best part about that is a lot of those applications can grow, so you don't have to replace them, when you grow to 10 people. So there's a decision point early on whether or not to go with kind of the more traditional on-site back office server solution with desktop computers. It's really driven by the business model itself, but there are ways to cost effectively purchase IT these days. It doesn't necessarily mean it's cheap, it's just more efficient. And that's really what you're trying to do with IT in general, is be as efficient as possible and kind of smooth over those choke points that you might get to as you grow in your business.
Yeah, and two, there's a lot of kind of free software out there, and there's lots of different packages, and I think there's a temptation to try to jump from one to the next and try them all, and some dabbling like that is probably okay, but I guess what I would recommend is that you try to focus in on 1 or 2 of those packages and make sure that the people that on your team or that you're collaborating with are using the same kinds of packages, and that you're not off, using different ones, and try to consolidate. And then also to really do a good job with backups and redundancy to make sure that you don't sort of run into an area where you lose or accidentally delete or otherwise kind of scramble your data that you're beginning to really rely on.
Yeah, I would add to that this idea of standardization, like choosing a platform and going with it, and not having sort of an ad hoc collection of various software. Anything from like desktop antivirus, for instance. You want to have one solution deployed as opposed to 3 or 4, and we typically see that a lot when we come into smaller businesses, that it's just sort of an ad hoc collection of things that have been cobbled together over a period of time, and sometimes it's when they've really realized that this isn't working anymore, and this is a hindrance to our growth because it's so hard to manage. And at that point, we were able to come in and help sort of move everything towards the standardization, best practices, good security, confidence and backups, and the ability to continue operations if there's some sort of disruption in the operation. But it's not always feasible to do that initially. But that mindset is important to have, as simple as possible, but also covering all the bases. So I think it's helpful to talk to somebody who's kind of done this and sort of understands the lay of the land, and sort of help navigate through some of those early decisions.
And when you talk about standardization, is it more helpful, or is there less risk involved if you're using like all Google products? Is that what you mean, or like sticking with Office or whatever it is, rather than picking a backup with this company and email with this? Is that what you mean by standardization, or?
Yeah, for the most part. Well, also versioning. So, like, for instance, that's a really strong reason to go with, Google Apps, for instance, or Office 365, because they're on a subscription model. You can buy just what you need, and Google Apps sometimes is free, but there's not as much development behind it, and Google Apps itself isn't as widely adopted. So you have some issues with collaboration with vendors and colleagues and things of that nature. But that being said, choosing a platform and staying with it, and building your processes in your organization around that platform is kind of what I'm getting at. But also versioning. You don't want to be running Office 2010 and Office 2013 and Office 2016 all in the same environment, or brand A of antivirus and on 3 computers, and then you've got another one over here and another one over there, and there's no central management of anything, and you kind of have to manually do everything, and it gets to be really unmanageable, and it's not scalable. It works great if you're 2 or 3 people, but when you start to get to 5 or 6 or 8, all of a sudden it starts to magnify the inefficiencies that were there, and you quickly get overwhelmed with chaos. But there are solutions out there that are well put together. Part of what information technology covers is sort of this interaction between platforms. So integrations are kind of the holy grail of IT, but between different platforms. Like, you want your accounting package to talk to your CRM package, but if you don't make the right decisions, you can create some bottlenecks, or you want to avoid doing double entry. You don't want to do work in one platform and then have to manually copy everything over to your accounting platform. What you really want is your CRM solution to send information automatically over to your accounting package, so that they're all tied together and they all kind of work.
Yeah, and you talked about antivirus a couple times, and I was wondering if you could clear up a myth for me. I heard that if you actually have more than one brand of antivirus downloaded onto your computer, does it actually make it less secure? Do they work against each other, or is that a myth that I've heard over and over?
So in the IT security realm, we always talk about belt and suspenders, but with antivirus in particular, you really can't run 2 antivirus applications on the same system, because the way that they interact with the operating system, they start butting heads. So you can't really do that, but not we call antivirus, virus is a very specific type of malware. So malware is kind of the general term, and there's all kinds of variants of malicious software, and so you need to have typically a couple of different layers of defense, one being anti-spyware perhaps, anti-malware in general, antivirus, maybe content filtering to prevent you from inadvertently getting redirected to a bad website or something like that may have the ability to disrupt your computer. Yeah. So in that regard, the reality is there's 3 or 4 or 5 touch points of IT security, which is a whole other topic. But the idea is to have a coherent strategy that addresses all of the vulnerabilities and protects your business. And it becomes even more important as you have more and more staff, because presumably your operation is growing, it's more profitable, and therefore there's more risk to disruption, just in terms of, you've got 6 or 7 people or maybe 20 people that are not working because of one incident. So as IT providers, we work to minimize those disruptions, identify risks, deploy countermeasures, manage that whole process. And it changes from various sizes of businesses. If it's a smaller operation, it's important, but it's not as critical. As you grow, it becomes more and more critical, not only to have good operational practices, but that you're protecting that as well.
And this, I think, leads into this question, or it might be a little redundant, you can tell me. So what types of risks would a small business owner be open to if they don't have a secure IT framework in place?
Well, disruption to operations, so there's a cost to that. There's a risk of data loss. The big thing that we see in the last 18 to 24 months is the advent of ransomware, which can be introduced into your IT environment through someone inadvertently opening an email and essentially launching this malicious attack. And basically what it does is it locks up all of your data that makes it so you can't get to it anymore. And then you get a ransom note saying, hey, we've got control over your data, and if you want it back, you need to send us money. And the money is sent through a somewhat complicated process of bitcoins, and nobody seems to know what that is, and it takes a couple of days to get that, and then if you don't respond quickly enough, then the ransom goes up. So we've seen a huge spike in this type of vulnerability, and it's really a education issue more than anything else. It's learning to recognize what types of emails are not really, they don't look correct, or they might look like they're coming from FedEx or UPS, but you didn't actually order something. Even in our business, we're getting invoices to our accounts payable address that are asking us to check into an invoice. Well, we don't do business with that particular company. So if someone in our organization didn't know that, they might open that email and then inadvertently launch something that we wouldn't want to have to deal with. But we have good countermeasures in place at our organization and with our clients that allow us to prevent a lot of this. But it's also just through education of staff, letting people know.
And there's other risks too that are more sort of business and operational, like if especially when you're on sort of the ramp up phase, then you're starting to provide services and products to customers. If you get locked out of your network, or if things like that fail and that causes a disruption in your timing and not being able to fulfill customer orders, or make your early production runs, I mean, there's little room for error during that startup phase. It's hard enough to start up a business without having sort of a major IT snafu. So beyond just the traditional risk associated with monies and dollars, is also just the risk of losing momentum in the startup.
Yeah. What are some common misconceptions about IT that you've run across with your customers?
I think probably one of the biggest ones is the cost of IT. What the cost and value of IT to an organization. So on the one hand, there tends to be an idea that, especially a business that's kind of growing in early stages, that they can manage IT on their own, and perhaps they have to for a while, but recognizing when to make transitions from a small business to a little bit larger business to, this isn't working anymore. What do we do now? And the cost around that. So oftentimes we'll see an office that has an office manager who has a set of responsibilities and somehow ended up becoming the IT person as well. So that works for a while, but then that person's doing two jobs, one of which they're not really skilled at day to day, and that starts taking away from their overall efficiency, and sort of when to make that decision. It's really, I had one person who went through the startup phase of a business and just never even thought about IT at all. Like he told me that, like I just never even had an idea about how much I should be spending, what's the appropriate set of tools that I should be using to make my business more efficient. So that I would count that as a bit of a misconception. I think also that you have to be IT savvy to use IT in your business. I don't think that's really that's a little bit of a misconception. I drive a car, but I can change the oil in a car, but I can't fix the major things. And I think that's an analogy in the sense that we use things in our daily life and in our businesses that we don't need to be experts in. We just need them to work. And when they don't work, you can kind of roll up your sleeves and try to fix them, but at the end of the day, you're kind of wasting your time.
Yeah. I think that ties in really well. Lisa had a question. When starting a small business that's maybe 1 to 3 employees, what dollar amount would you suggest to budget for that initial, those IT expenses?
So at that stage, it's probably overkill to have a full service kind of managed IT services company. Again, it depends on what the focus of your business is. At that stage, you probably would want to work with an IT consultant that maybe charges by the hour or has a limited set of services. Typically, you're looking at $100 to $125 an hour for consulting. It's a different business model than what we practice because it's kind of tied to not really a full engagement with the organization, but more of a kind of what we call like an on-call sort of break-fix scenario. And that can work for a while, but at some point, either that business is going to outgrow that person's capabilities or that person is going to get overwhelmed with they themselves having too much to do, if you will. Mm-hmm. As far as a specific dollar amount, we've done studies on this, and we've kind of come to the conclusion that, depending on the size of the business, it can be anywhere from $150 to $200 a month per employee when you factor in hardware, software purchases, some IT support, maybe on a per hour basis or something like that. When we're working with, let's say a 20 or 25 person organization, their total IT spend is typically at that point, maybe 1 or 2% of their revenue, their budget, and that could translate into, I don't know, $200, $250 per employee per month. But that's kind of a full cost, mm-hmm. meaning IT support, hardware, software purchases to support that employee. If you look at, median salary figures across the board, they say, the typical person makes, I don't know, $50,000 a year or something. If you're talking about a $200 a month additional cost to that salary, this is all very theoretical, but you're looking at, $200, $2,500 a year to support a $50,000 a year employee. Mm-hmm. It's actually not that much. Mm-hmm. relatively speaking.
Yeah.
So there's a wide range. It depends. If you're in financial services and you have a lot of compliance requirements, then that IT cost is going to be substantially higher.
Yeah, absolutely. So what advice might you have for some of those out there that have started a business because they're passionate about what they're doing, but are maybe more technology challenged, or maybe even just intimidated by computers and technology? Where should they start? How do you keep it really simple for those people?
Well, I think it goes back to this idea that if they're passionate about their business, that, I mean, technology is going to be a component of that. It's really like any other aspect of running a business. You know, you may be financially challenged. Maybe finance isn't your top subject. Maybe you have challenges with operations. It reminds me of the famous book by Michael Gerber, The E-Myth, which was a book that my wife and I read 25 years ago when we started a coffee business, that really opened our eyes to the concept that when you're running a business, you're actually running a business. You need to work on the business itself as opposed to working in the business. And that is also a transition point. When you first start a small business, you necessarily have to do everything. You're doing 5 or 6 different things. But what you want to try to visualize is down this path of growth, if I'm 1 or 2 people now, what does it look like when I'm 10 people? Am I still going to be doing all 5 of those jobs, or am I going to delegate that work out? And so that's a concept of like the maturity of the business. You need to identify what you can delegate out, which could include delegating IT responsibilities to an outsourced expert. Ramsey and I were talking on the way over about, well, when's it time to hire your first IT employee? And I said, well, it's probably about the time you would hire your staff attorney and your staff CPA and maybe the staff chef.
The answer is maybe never.
Maybe never.
Some things are just better outsourced. You know, sometimes it's better to let someone else do it for you.
I had written something, I just found it the other day, where a mature business identifies what their core competencies are, like what is the business, what does it do, what's the purpose of the business, and they outsource everything else. So we outsource quite a few things in our organization. We outsource our payroll, we outsource most of our marketing, we outsource some of our very high-level system engineering that we do. We don't have a need to have a $120,000 a year employee on staff. It doesn't make any sense. We don't have enough work to keep that person justified. So we outsource that. We've identified experts who do nothing but high-level systems engineering security work, and they gladly work for us, and we pay them by the hour, and they do great work, and our clients are happy, we're happy, they're happy, it just works great. So, but you're managing that relationship. So as a business owner, that's really what your focus should be, is keeping your clients satisfied, keeping your customers happy, and understanding how to manage the business itself. Now, early stage, yes, you have to do quite a few different things. I have probably 3 jobs at Brightwire, and I'm figuring out how do I work myself out of a job.
Yeah.
You know.
So for some of the smaller businesses that are on the line, would it be something as simple as making sure that you have like a backup and email? I mean, those kinds of things are their key subscription services that you would say, no matter what industry you're in, this is what you should have at the minimum.
Yeah, clearly a backup and the ability to restore operations is probably the number one thing. It's the number one focus we have at Brightwire for our clients. We are extremely paranoid and fastidious about ensuring that we can recover if something horrible happened to a client. Now, if it were a regional earthquake and 30 of our clients were cratered because of, fires and floods and earthquakes and tsunamis, it's going to take some time for us to recover. But on a day-to-day basis, we need to ensure that we have the ability to restore all of the systems in a timely manner. So making it simple, yes, make sure you have really good backups that are tested on a regular basis so that you know that these backups are good, and understanding how long it takes to recover. So there might be 3 or 4 options of backups. Some might take a whole day to recover from, which might be fine. Some might take 2 or 3 days to recover from, which might be fine for your particular organization. There are organizations that cannot be down for more than 2 hours, and there's a cost to that as well. Mm-hmm. So if you can't be down for more than 2 hours, I would presume that you are a pretty big organization and that you have the resources to spend a lot more money to ensure that you are never down for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. If you're a regular small business in the local community and you just need the ability to restore and you can kind of hobble along for a day, then that's relatively inexpensive. There's some, a little bit of software, a little bit of hardware, and a little bit of just verifying that things are working properly. It's probably good enough. Making sure you have your backups off-site is really important, because there's always the possibility of a building catastrophe, a fire, or who knows, floods. Mm-hmm.
And the ransomware these days can encrypt your backup as well. If you have a backup device that's connected by USB or something to your computer, then the malware is smart enough to jump over to your backup and either wipe it out or encrypt it at the same time. And so, that plays into what's really important for everybody, just paying close attention to what is coming into your email inbox, and don't click random things that you don't know what they are. Look really carefully at the headers to see that messages are actually coming from who the sender is claiming that it's coming from, and be really suspicious if you're getting something from a bank and you don't bank there. It sounds obvious, but and then because most of the attacks are successful because people are going through their email and they've got hundreds of messages and they're trying really fast, and this looks interesting, you click the wrong thing. So it's really a matter of just being really careful about what you're looking at, what you're clicking.
So the cloud versus local computer network for things like email, software, storage. What's your perspective on what's safer, what's better, what's cheaper?
Well, again, it depends on the business, but most businesses we work with these days, even very small businesses, already are in what we call kind of a mixed environment, hybrid, cloud versus local. So it's really a matter of managing where your data resides and does it make sense for your business. I would say for email, 99% of the time, it makes sense to have your email hosted outside of your physical building. We have a few clients that, for various reasons, have email on site these days, but it does add cost and complexity to managing that environment, and you have to sort of pre-purchase that infrastructure to support that, and it just costs more money in the long run. Whereas with something like Gmail or Google Apps, if that's what you're using, or Office 365, again, the cloud model is really based on a monthly subscription model, which allows you to scale very closely to what your actual staffing needs are, and it allows you to stay current because Microsoft or Google is handling all that back-end support. So there is a bit of a misnomer about having everything hosted in the cloud because of requirements of some software that you might use in your business. It may require you to have what essentially a dedicated server that otherwise could be in your back office, and running that infrastructure in a cloud environment. It's not necessarily cheaper. It can give you longer term efficiencies and scalability But if it's something you have to have a discussion, a business discussion with someone like myself or another IT consultant that really understands that. It may be much more cost effective to have an on-premise local server for a time, or build that hybrid mix where you're kind of doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you're managing it.
Mm-hmm.
We do have some clients that are as close to 100% cloud as you can get. They have a data center that we help manage, and but they still have computers at their local office.
Mm-hmm.
They still have to connect to the offsite data center location where they're doing their applications and their printing, and so it does make it in some ways a little bit more, definitely more complex.
To have everything
in the cloud, right? And even if you're using a variety of cloud services that are available, like let's say Salesforce and QuickBooks Online and Office 365, well, the thing to keep in mind is if you have 3 or 4 or 5 of these applications that are running for you, for instance, that means all of your information is sort of scattered in different places, and you have 4 or 5 different vendors, and you don't really know where all of your data is. It's just kind of out there hosted by some vendor. And that can work well, but you just have to be aware of the fact that what happens if one of those goes away for a day? Or, I mean, I don't think Microsoft is going anywhere anytime soon, but it could happen that there is a service outage, and you still have to manage that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a matter of who do I call? How do I get this working again? What's the issue? So that in itself can get a little bit unwieldy after a period of time.
Yeah.
But the real benefit of it is that you're not having to manage all of the sort of under the hood back-end infrastructure. There's somebody, you don't know them by name, but there's somebody working, there's a team of people working to keep that infrastructure running for you.
Yeah. So what are, especially I think this one's important for, we have so many people that work remotely or maybe across organizations. So what are some effective ways for teams of people to collaborate online and share documents with each other in a safe, reliable, or free, maybe inexpensive way?
Well, again, well, like for an example, like Dropbox, for instance, is one that many people use. In a very small environment, that can work well. And of course, it depends on how the operations of a particular business is sort of set up to run. But if you're just doing file sharing, maybe collaboration through instant messaging, maybe some like a Skype type solution, a small business can pretty easily put together some pretty amazing technologies in communication using essentially free or very low cost solutions. What it really comes down to is that these low cost solutions are typically designed for very small businesses, like less than 5 people, which could be great. Could be, there's a lot of small businesses that can really benefit from that. If you're on a growth path and you're going to get beyond that level, most of these solutions don't scale very well. Like for instance, Dropbox, it's a file sharing utility. If you're using that amongst 10 people and you have 10 computers that are all sharing a Dropbox solution, every time somebody makes a change, it has to replicate to all 10 of those computers. So if you are all in different locations, that can work. If you happen to be in the same location, then you're going to kill all your bandwidth because you've got computers that are all uploading and downloading all at the same time. And so those are kind of the gotchas.
Interesting.
When you have a little bit larger organization, I think we're working with a new account that has some remote staff, like field supervisors that are out, and they never come into the office. So we had to come up with a solution that would work for them, and that was one of the things that we looked at. Was a Dropbox solution would absolutely not work for them because they have a an office here in Olympia, and then they have, I don't know, 15 people out all over the state of Washington that never come in, and they don't have a lot of bandwidth at that office. So that solution would not work. So we came up with a different solution that is similar, but it allows us to store all of the local data that everyone needs to use at the local office. So everyone in the office is just connected into the office, and it's great. And then the remote team, they're just getting they have a synchronization tool that allows them to have a copy of that information on their local computer, and as they make changes, it just changes to their one computer when they get connected to the internet again. So same solution, but it's architected a little bit differently to account for the fact that what they were looking to do would have been a complete disaster.
Related to Dropbox, there's Dropbox and there's Dropbox Pro, the Pro version. What are some of the differences or reasons why or when companies should use the Pro version? Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Because standard Dropbox is just free, right? So Pro, I'm assuming, has the fees to it.
Well, typically when you're looking at you have a free product, it's gonna have basic functionality, and that's about it. You have no support typically. When you're starting to pay for a product, whether it be Dropbox or any antivirus product, there's lots of free ones. The whole idea behind that model is to have to gain some market share, and it has a little bit of limited functionality. So when you decide that you need that additional functionality or that additional support, then there's a fee associated with that. And that's typically what you'd see with a Dropbox product like that. Dropbox was originally designed for consumers. It never really was a business grade solution. So there's a lot of issues with document security in a business environment, in the sense that there's no control over where that document goes. You have a document that's going to 10 people in your organization, that's great, but you have no idea who made changes to it. You had no idea who may have emailed that to somebody. It gets a little messy when you're dealing with compliance, when you're dealing with an employee who's leaving. How do you handle the fact that they have all of your company data on their laptop and they're no longer with you anymore? There are other tools that are functionally similar to a free Dropbox, but have some of those control mechanisms in place where you have the ability to, wipe a device so that the documents don't exist on that anymore when you disable the account, for instance. So it becomes more of a feature-rich control situation in a business environment. So again, it's that transition point between I'm just starting out, I'm 3 employees, but we have plans to be 10 or 15 employees over the next 24 to 48 months or something. Whatever your business vision is, whatever the goal is, those are the types of considerations that you need to be concerned about. And that goes back to that misconception question. There's a reason why it's free, and it can work great. I mean, I'm always amazed at, we use Slack, which is an instant messaging tool in our organization, and we use the free version, and it's amazing. It works great for us, but we don't have the ability to keep track of all the information because that's part of the paid version of it. But we don't have a need for that. So and Slack is fantastic. I mean, I was sending an instant message to one of our staff guys today, and I thought he was down the hall, but he was actually on a client site, 15 miles away, and he immediately responded and answered my question, and it was good to go. And we use that for just quick communication. It's not email. It's just, nothing mission critical, and you can do all kinds of fun stuff with it. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up Slack because I actually just heard about it for the first time last week. Somebody else who had a lot of different, remote employees, they use it for people have to check in by a certain time sometimes, or just like really quick things. So, yeah, good to know it has at least two endorsements there.
Well, and it's a little more real time than like an email. So we have one employee who's in South Carolina. We have a contractor who's in Texas, and so it really, and we have people out in the field all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't really matter where they are. It's on my phone. It's on my laptop. It's on my desktop computer. You can kind of get a sense of where everybody is, and it's a quick. You can see when someone's typing. So I mean, that's the power of that instant messaging platform.
Yeah. So you've talked a little bit about, things that might work if they're like an under 3-person or under 5-person organization. But what are some indicators, or how does a company know when they're outgrowing their existing processes and systems? So when is it time to bite the bullet and make the changements and make an investment as they grow?
Well, I think I started off the conversation around the idea that information technology is really a business enabler, if you will. So it really ties back to how the business itself, without regard to IT at all, how is the business itself structured operationally? So I always go back to operational efficiency, this concept of operational maturity, meaning how well developed are the processes of a particular business that will allow it to grow. So information technology is really just a tool to execute on the operational processes that have been developed by the management team, if you will, to fulfill the mission of their company. So in our case, we recognized that we had some operational inefficiencies, not necessarily related to IT, but that we solved with IT by building some automation in our company. So we have, we're a 12-person company, and we have, I don't know, half a dozen integrated systems that work in conjunction.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're constantly looking for ways to automate and to cross-check what we're doing in our organization. So to answer your question directly, I would say when you start to see that you're doing something twice, when you're double entering, or you've got a manual process that's not connected to another system that you have to sort of build this connectivity between different operational platforms. So, and it could be departmental, like you have a sales team. How does your sales team interact with your service team? Is there a way to create, alerts, indicators, communication to make sure that your sales team is working well with your service team? And if your sales team is working great and your service team is working great and you're growing, what about your human resources? How are you going to recruit, train, and retain somebody new in your organization? As you grow, and maybe it's at the 8 to 10 person point of staff level, and I don't know if this is true for all business, but suddenly communication becomes incredibly important.
Mm.
You have a lot of tribal knowledge when you're 4 or 5 people. When you're 8 or 10 people, all of a sudden people are scattered all over the place. They have different functions. People have much more specific roles. There's less generalization, and what we discovered is it's communication and making sure that when things get handed off to different people, that there's a coherent, sort of flow chart to that whole process. And that's where you look for technology to make things more automated, in the sense that whatever platform you've chosen to run your business, it has to have the capability to be flexible enough, but also be scalable enough to grow with the processes that you've developed in your organization, so that you can deliver your product, you can deliver your services, whatever it is that you're doing. When it's kind of a logarithmic scale. If you're 15 people, then it's even worse.
Yeah.
So
it's a
unless you have it figured out.
It's a business service volume issue too. Like when you get to a volume of either service delivery or product delivery such that your current processes are slowing you down at this point, that's when you really need to take those processes and begin to automate them or to streamline them. When you've figured out what those processes are, because as a small business, you spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the process really needs to be and trying to become, effective at it. And once you've sort of figured out what that process should or needs to look like, then you can begin to really automate it.
Great. So what are managed IT services, and how is that different from service providers by traditional tech support or computer repair type companies?
Yeah, well, the managed IT services are really, the difference there is that the provider of those services really wants to keep everything running smoothly at the business, because when you have managed services, you bring on essentially a partner to be kind of your IT department externally. And so that's what we do. We provide a toolkit and a set of services for security and file sharing and email and network and everything else, and we provide help desk and technical support, and that's all included in a single sort of monthly subscription. And so the traditional model is you just call upon somebody when you need to build something new or when that thing breaks, and you fix it. And so you always go through this calculus in your mind of, is it bad enough to call in somebody to fix it because that's going to cost me money, and or can I go ahead and fix it again myself? But when you have managed services, you don't have to go through that calculus because it's the same flat rate. Their goal is the same as your goal, which is to keep everything running smoothly kind of all at once. And that way it's more predictable each month. It's more consistent. You don't get surprised by big bills that sort of come through all at once. And if you're doing regular maintenance and you're being effective about it, then things won't break as much. So that works in your favor as well.
And why should a small business, pay every month for managed IT services, even if their IT systems are running fine and nothing is broken right now? Everything's going okay.
Yeah, why fix it if it ain't broke?
Mm-hmm.
But that just gets back to that notion that you pay that same flat amount to keep everything running. Because the vast majority of what we do is stuff that's invisible in the background. Clients don't necessarily see it, but we're patching their software, we're rolling out new security fixes, and all of those things, running the backups, actually testing the backups and doing verification and reporting. All of those things are the reasons why the things are not breaking and why they're running smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you pay that sort of incremental, consistent amount each month, it's actually far more cost effective because things aren't breaking. So even though you're sort of tempted to think that nothing's happening, why should I pay it? That's really not the case.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would add to that is that it's rare when we come on board with a new client opportunity that that's another misconception that, hey, nothing's broken, I only want to pay as I go type of thing. There's, if there's a single IT consultant, if there's an employee that's kind of doing it part-time, or perhaps even an IT specialist who's on staff, depending on the size of the company, information technology as a major component of a business, regardless of the size of the business, there is just a long list of things that have to be done on a regular basis. It may not look broken, but the truth of the matter is, it is. I mean, it's rare that we come into an organization that's called us in that doesn't have a long list of deferred maintenance that really needs to be done just to get them into sort of a standard best practice compliance that would allow them to start strategically using IT to fulfill their business goals. And part of that is that even if you had a part-time person working on it, there's so many things that are just really boring, and tedious, patch management, antivirus rollouts and updates, disk checks, all the stuff you do under the hood, that we have tools to do this in an automated fashion that we've invested in that no small business could afford to buy. I mean, because we're supporting 45 companies and 1,500 employees in the region. That gives us the ability to, if you look at the companies that Brightwire supports, we're like a mid-size enterprise, if you will, right? I think I figured it out. It's like $250 million of revenue Brightwire supports through our services, and that's a huge responsibility. I mean, we take that very seriously, and we have the ability to do a lot of these automation tools that I wouldn't want to do. I think it's incredibly boring to check on whether or not my antivirus is up to date or check the backup. But we have methodologies in place where we have a whole team of people doing that. So I think that it's important to value IT for how it can help your business fulfill its objectives. And that's not to say that if you're really small that you can't get by with kind of an ad hoc solution. I think that's a cost-effective way to go. It's just that if you grow beyond that, you have to realize that at some point you're going to have to make that decision to move to something that's going to fulfill your needs.
Yeah. And you've brought up a couple times, backing up your data. How often would you recommend a small business to back? I mean, should it be daily, weekly, monthly? What does it make sense?
Well, there's two components to that. So essentially, I would say, it could be at a minimum daily. You have to ask yourself, if I lost a week's worth of data, what would that mean to my organization? So typically, you want to back up at least once a day. Some of our clients back up every 2 hours, and there's cases where people are backing up every 15 minutes. Just depends on what their tolerance for downtime is.
Right.
So for a typical small business, you certainly want to back up, in my opinion, every day, and you want to be able to do a test restore at least quarterly, if not monthly, just to kind of make sure that, hey, this backup is actually working. And you want to check the backups every day, because if you're doing a daily backup and it fails for some reason and you're not checking it, and 3 weeks go by, I've walked into new client opportunities where they haven't had a good backup in 6 months. And they thought they had backups. It's like, well, no, look here, this has been failing
every day for 6
months.
Oh, gosh.
No one's been checking this. So,
yeah.
It's a false sense of security in that regard. So there's the backup interval, and then there's also the recovery time objective, meaning whatever backup solution I'm using, how long will it take me to restore from, scenario A, B, or C. And again, I think I mentioned that before, but for some, they can be down for a day or two, and it's not great, but they'll survive.
Yeah.
And that's a reasonably lower cost solution to have that sort of recovery time objective of a couple of days. But if you're 20 employees, you probably want to be up and running in 4 hours or less. So what solution do you need to ensure that you can recover in 4 hours or less? And there's, the quicker you need to recover, the more expensive it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you guys so much. We're pretty much at 1 o'clock, our closing time here, but if you have any questions, you're still welcome to type those in, or we can take any of those. But thank you both, Todd and Ramsey, so much. There's a lot of information here and really breaking it down for the small businesses. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Our pleasure.
And I have their contact information here for you if you want to learn more about Brightwire, or if you have any questions for them. And then we also have the other upcoming webinars for the next 4 weeks, if those topics sound good to you. Oh, not a question. Thanks, Diana, for joining us. Glad you found it useful. We will, people are welcome to head out, like I said, unless you have any questions. I'll stop the recording now, but I'll stick around for a couple minutes in case you're typing away your question. Thanks, everybody.